Welcome to this week's edition of Military Trailblazer Office Hours. Thank you for taking the time out of your Wednesday evening to spend it here in the spirit of community mentorship and learning. I'm your host, Dave Albright, joined by the ever-present Dave Nava and Geraldine Hall. I'm a solution engineer at Salesforce and Military Trailblazer. Each week, we invite a co-host or co-host to take part in the conversation so that we can leverage their experience, expertise, and unique perspectives. The focus for tonight's session is get your reps in, ideas for practical application and tips for generating alternative work experience. So if you ever been interested in practical application and how to get better at Salesforce, which we all should be, this is a session for you. I'd like to welcome and briefly introduce our co-host for tonight's session, Jodi Hrbek. Really doesn't need much introduction. She's well known within the ecosystem. Jodi is a Salesforce consultant with Invitation Homes and a well-known veteran of the ecosystem with 2 decades of experience. With her relatable personality, excellent communication, and smart sensibility, she has helped countless professionals amplify and take charge of their Salesforce careers. She's the best-selling author of the book Rock Your Role as a Salesforce Admin, as well as an audio learning creator with her series Listen Up, Salesforce Admins. She is a prolific content creator on LinkedIn, where she provides invaluable tips, actionable techniques, and practical advice for professional success. Finally, she is the founder and event host of the Demo.org Demo Jam, a series of free virtual events to showcase the talent of Salesforce newcomers and inspire people to get busy building. It's great to have you co-hosting Office Hours with me, Jodi. Welcome. And if you'd like to take a moment to introduce yourself, we'd all love to hear it.
I mean, honestly, I'm going to hire you to be my agent. I don't know that I can add anything after that. So thank you very much. That was a very kind introduction. Short story for folks I have not yet had the opportunity to meet, although I see a lot of friendly and familiar faces out there. So hello to all. Again, Jodi Hrbek, I am 22 years into my Salesforce career. I like to say that I think I might be literally the original accidental admin. I was fortunate to stumble into a Salesforce position early in my career, and it has served me very well ever since. So during that time, I usually say I've been fortunate to have lots of different seats at the table. I worked for Salesforce for 4 years. I was an independent consultant for a number of years, but I have spent the bulk of my career working on the client side and leading teams both in scrappy startups, big, huge enterprises, both admins, developers, doing all sorts of things from Sales Cloud, Service Cloud, and a very complex custom build. So that's enough about me.
No, thank you. That's excellent. Obviously, most of us here, I think, know you from your reputation and, you know, the amount of information you put out into the ecosystem. So it's really an honor to be able to bring you on here and talk to you about some of these things. We'll do some quick boilerplate and then we'll get into some questions for you. So for those joining for the first time, we always like to briefly explain the purpose of these office hours. These sessions are an informal get-together for gathering with military trailblazers and allies to explore non-technical Salesforce career and branding-related topics to help you achieve your professional development and career-related goals. The next hour is intended to be an opportunity for collaborative mentorship. Everyone on the call is encouraged to step up and help answer questions from your perspective, which will provide additional diversity of experience to the answers given. Please keep an eye on the chat window during tonight's session. I and others on this call share a lot of great information there, including learning, networking, and employment opportunities. If you'd like to share a question at any time or point during today's session, please feel free to do so. If you don't feel as comfortable speaking up, you can also post your questions in chat. We'll do our best to monitor the chat window and also be looking for raised hands. Finally, tonight's session is being recorded. If you'd like to share an attribution-free comment, please let us know before speaking, and we'll be sure to it's edited out of the final recording. So let's dive into the importance of, you know, your experience and really the discussion of how to get those practical reps. And so as we talked about while we're waiting, kind of get everyone in and enter, you know, let people into the chat. A lot of people come into the Salesforce ecosystem and you slug your way through that first test, right? And that's a little bit of a challenge in its own right and an emotional experience. once you do that, you think, hey, I've got that cert, now I can do anything, and you realize it's just that license to learn. So for someone new to learn, what hands-on projects or challenges would you suggest they start with to build confidence and competence?
Well, anyone who has spent any time with me, including I have some demo jammers, at least one in the audience, knows what my answer is going to be. So without a doubt, this is a question that I get asked all the time. And I'm a broken record. There we go. Hands on keyboard for the win. Thank you, Amanda. You got to get busy building. And we can talk a little bit about what that means. And kind of the short answer is, I think every single person who is a Salesforce professional, but certainly those aspiring to be one, should first and foremost go out to the Salesforce developer site and sign up for a free dev org, and use it not only to build something when you think you're ready because you have the cert, but you use it in tandem while you're working to get the cert. And the beauty of that is it really changes the nature of cert prep, that instead of memorizing and trying to, learn steps for something you've never done, instead, you're actually doing the work, and the cert just becomes remembering, wait, how did I do that again? And it is how the aha moments, it's where they happen. It's where the learning happens. So I see a lot from people that say, I'm going to start my demo org as soon as I have my cert. And so I just want to put that out there that, the time to start your demo org is today, regardless of where you are in your journey. And I also like to remind everybody, the question of, how much does it cost to get a dev org? Anybody? What does it cost? Zero, right? I always say Mark Benioff doesn't give a lot of stuff away for free, but we can get a lot of these, as many as we want to. So all the more reason we don't have to wait like it's this special thing, my org, I'm not ready. Like, guess what? You can have a starter demo org, and then you can have a follow-up demo org, and then you can change your mind later. It's not a tattoo. That's another piece of advice. So, the time to get busy building is today. Wherever you are, you start where you are.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's a recurring theme really in anything that you learn, right? You learn to speak a language, you got to go out and you got to do it, right? Like Jared Lynn was saying, how do you learn to speak that language? You got to get out and just do it. Coding, same way. What do they tell you? Fingers on keyboards, right? You have to apply it. You have to apply it. And the other thing that we've really kind of talked about here on Office Hours is, and looking back, I would have done things differently. I've been in the ecosystem only a short time of 4 years or so, maybe 5. I really slammed through a lot of certs because to me, watching it was like, well, if I got certs, I could stand out from others. But really, when you get those certs, how much are you able to apply it, right? Yeah, I remembered it. I got through the tests and things like that, but it's really being able to continually apply that and work through the problem solving of, why is my flow not working? Why is my OmniScript stuck? And so part 2 to that equation is when you go for a job, it's like, yeah, I have these certs. Okay, show me what you've done.
Yeah.
I got these certs.
Right. So I'll tell you the other reason why I am so bullish on everybody getting busy building in hands on keyboards. To me, it's, you get 2 for the price of 1, right? On the one hand, it's how we learn and how we have those learnings, what we just talked about. On the other hand, it's how we prove, right, our competence. It's how we reduce risk. Every hiring manager is nervous. Am I making the right decision? Am I bringing in somebody that really can do the things that they say they can do, right? So it proves that. But wait, as they say in the advertising world, there's more. Walking through a presentation, showing what you've built, is also a way that you can demonstrate the other things that you bring to the table. And every single person on this call has tremendous life experience, whether it was from the military, whether it was being a military spouse and living in different places and managing logistics of so many moves, whatever it is, whatever your background is, you get to show up and show off those skills by building something relevant, right? So I might say something like new to Salesforce, but not new to project management. I built the app I wish I had when I was leading technical projects,
Mm,
blah, blah, blah. Or, and not only are we building something from an application standpoint that is demonstrating those skills, but simply how we present, how we talk
mm.
about it, how we explain our rationale for why we built something a certain way. All of those are really critical skills that people are, looking for when they're bringing people on. And so this is a way that you get to not only show your technical chops, but show what else you bring to the table.
Yes, everything you say there, I'm like shaking my head over here looking at the screen, like it just totally resonates. And um, myself and Dave, we've sat on some hiring panels and things like that, and the ability to walk in, like you said, and okay, I'm Dave Albright and I've got X number of certs. And I thought when I first started all this stuff that mattered most. But if you can walk in and say, I have X number of certs, but here's something I saw and I learned I wanted to solve with the platform, and here's how I did it. Let me show you the path. Because like you are saying, Jodi, so poignantly, is here's the other side of it. You might have 30 certs, but if you can't talk to the customer, it gets very difficult at that point, because the human side of it, the soft skills are so important. And I can teach someone Salesforce. It's very hard to teach someone soft skills.
That's
So
right.
if you're able to sit there and present and walk someone through how you problem solved it, figured the use case, did the solution with the platform, and then build it and architected it, right? Or architect it and build it. What else do you need, right? You've got consultancy 101 right there. So,
Well, and what I was going to tell you, David, is what I hear time and time again is in doing that, it changes the tone and tenor of the interview, right? And so
mm,
suddenly, instead of having to answer questions and somebody's going through their script of all the things they wanted to ask you, you're having a conversation, you're doing a little demo. Now they legit want to look and understand what you built and why you made a decision a certain way. And wow, look at that flow and those flow paths, whatever it is. I hear that all the time, that it really makes a difference in terms of how you're perceived. And suddenly it's a conversation that feels more like a colleague or a mentee, mentor, or quite frankly, oftentimes, even though you're new to the ecosystem, you may have had the time and inclination to build something that the person that you're interviewing with hasn't yet had time to look at. And I can tell you that from, participating in so many of the demo jams now, I learn something every time. And every single time I see, like, wait, what's a repeater flow? Wait, what is this slider? Wait, how did you do that? Right? Somebody that was sitting on the last demo jam with me has 15 years of expertise. He's one of our coaches. He's IMing me through the whole thing, going, wait, what is that? I've got yet another thing I'm going to go Google. And the truth of the matter is, many of us that are busy running orgs and running teams, we just don't have the time that we wish we would to go hands-on keyboard ourselves, even though, by the way, it's not just for newcomers. It's a thing we should all be doing. But, so many hours in the day, you can show up and literally teach the team that's trying to hire you something and prove your value just by what you might choose to show off.
yes, 100%. And I've noticed that, and we were talking about that before we really started the recording and let people into the room, is my current role at Salesforce. I've been really a lot more customer facing and a lot less fingers on the keyboard and actually building and usually farming that work out to others. And so I'm constantly watching what they're building, like, how did you do that? Never mind the fact that the platform is so rapidly changing,
Yeah.
right? Omni Studio, Flow, you see it all, every evolution of it that comes out, every one of those 3 releases, you're like, no, can we slow down? I didn't get the last one. So yeah, good points. Dave, you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick comment. I found early in my career, when I didn't necessarily know a whole lot, that the release notes were my superpower. So when they release obviously new features 3 times a year, nobody knows what those features are unless you're at Salesforce and product. So you are on a level playing field. And if you can be out there demoing the latest stuff, whether you learned that this morning or not, it makes you look like you know what you're doing, and it gives you a leg up on everybody else. So that's something that I took on, and I would always read the release notes, find cool things, and either show them internally at my company or post it on LinkedIn and share it externally. It's a great thing to do to enhance your skills and to be building.
Yeah. And I guarantee you to that point, just given the pace of change, that's why I say newcomers have an advantage. And there's a lot of orgs that are still, you know, riddled with tech debt and, you know, trying to make their way to the final gasp of their classic to lightning migration, let alone have they had a chance to do all of their process builder and workflows to flow, right? I mean, we kind of laugh about that, but that is the truth in a lot of big companies. And, you know, it's a luxury to go sometimes have the time to go find all the latest and greatest. And I really believe that newcomers aren't having to unlearn some of the things that some of us that are rusty old Salesforce peeps that have been doing this for a long time, they have an advantage of coming in with, you know, fresh eyes and fresh skills, and being able to, you know, show a few things like that really makes people understand right from the get-go the value that that new perspective can bring to a team.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, right? Because when I started and Geraldine and I were working together on a large PubSec project, the architects would immediately switch into Classic, and they would be ripping around in Classic. Oh, it's faster, but really it was just you know what you know and you're comfortable with it. And now everyone's pretty much Lightning, right? And now we're going to the next version of that. So, okay, on to the next question, because I think we beat that horse, but it just, man, hindsight 2020, the things I would have changed coming through the learning process, right? And still continually learning. What role does continuous experimentation and hands-on work play in keeping skills sharp and staying relevant in the fast evolving Salesforce ecosystem, right? Great lead into that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you just hit on a lot of that. And, you know, I do think that everybody should have a demo org. I have had one that is probably 15 years old now that, you know, I continue to use for all sorts of things. But the truth of the matter is, even as you, well, especially because of the change, right? There's so much change we have to. But I think it's also really something for everybody to be deliberate about as you rise through the ranks in your career, because we tend to be obviously not necessarily hands-on keyboard. David, you just gave that example that, you know, you changed in your role that you weren't hands-on keyboard as much anymore. And we might need to know things to different levels of detail, but given the way this platform evolves, if you don't continue to have some amount of hands-on keyboard, I'm going to go build it, I'm going to go understand exactly how this works, what I'm talking about, it's easy to lose some of that you know, skill set that you spent a lot of time and effort trying to learn.
Yes. And Amanda put a comment in here about figured out ability, right? That is a key critical aspect of this. I think when we all come into it, especially with the imposter syndrome, we think there's these wizards like the Jodies of the world, the Navas of the world, who just kind of know all this stuff. And you're like, hey, how do you do this? And then they say, I don't know, let's go figure it out. And you're like, wait, what? And that the gumption, I think, sometimes to try and go figure it out is also a skill set that you bring to the table.
Well, and Amanda said one of my favorite terms, I call it the figure it out factor, right? That's another thing that we prove out when we show up with the demo org, wherever we are, you know, in the interview process, wherever we are in our career, is that's the other thing that every hiring manager is looking for, because the dirty little secret is nobody knows anything, right? In Salesforce, because even if you think you do, it already changed. Right? Or even if you did for your last client, well, your new client is totally different, has their own gotchas and what ifs and what about this is. And, you know, the way that we, you know, the secret sauce is not that we have all the answers. The secret sauce is that we know we need to ask all the questions. You guys know I'm going there. Anybody who spends any time with me, that's, you know, really what I believe is the number one thing that we can do to improve the quality of our Salesforce solutions, is making sure that we're asking better questions and asking questions better. But then we take that information and we figure it out, what is going to be the best and the right sized solution given those business parameters. And there's never a single right answer. In this job, there is never a single right answer.
No, you want it to be right. You want it to be black and white and very cut and dried, and it's not. It is shades of gray, right? And everything is a compromise and a trade-off, right? And particularly in performance or scale and things like that. And that is where I think you come into the master's level of, you know, the well-architected and your game, right? Especially as admins continue to evolve into what used to be maybe an admin / consultant. Now it's the or the ad developer, I guess is what it's called now, where you got admins kind of really starting to get into code. And we, I think, ask more of the admins. So now that weight really comes back to you to really be able to get to the use case, get to the why, right? Which is what we're going to talk on now. It's just getting to those questions.
David, the one piece, I'm sorry,
Go ahead.
before we go there, the one piece that I wanted to really emphasize, just to take it back to demo orgs and newcomers trying to break in, it's really important to realize when you are showing off your demo org that you're likely to get questions. Hey, that's interesting. Why you decided to do it that way. The key takeaway I want everybody to have is don't assume that means you did it wrong, right? We all have the tendency to go, oh, and and I'm going to back out and try to explain it, or just feel like I must have done it wrong. Because of what we just talked about, more often than not, somebody just wants to understand your thought process, how you came to that conclusion, how you communicate that thought process, maybe how you communicate the options that were considered, and ultimately why you decided to go with a particular approach. So just note one of those things to write down, that as you're getting ready to go in those interviews, you're going to get questions. That's a good thing. Don't be defensive. Just use it as an opportunity to talk through kind of your thought process.
Yeah, great point. Because I think I've had that early on where it's like, wait, are they questioning me? And then you kind of feel like, no, they just really want to hear how you got to that point. Because as you get more experience, you realize there's a whole bunch of paths to get to that point. And each of them has, again, that trade-off. What were you thinking when you went this path versus this path? Have you thought of this? It's not a ding. It's more like just seen another way. Yeah. Or oftentimes it's someone who doesn't have finger on keyboards going, man, how'd you get to that? Because that's pretty sweet.
Amen to that. That's very true. And the other advice that I always have as well is don't solution in a vacuum. And, that I say that even to solo admins, because, there's lots of ways that you can network and have an admin buddy or somebody like that. But for all of these reasons, we all only know what we know. We only know what we've been exposed to. I've been doing Salesforce for 22 years, but there's clouds I've never looked at. There's pieces of functionality I've never had reason to use. There's things that came out in the last 2 years that I've been, not hands-on keyboards, and I don't know how they work or what the nuances are or what the art of the possible is on some things. So to the extent you can, I always encourage my team, we call them amigos sessions, where, before we're building something to the point where we can't undo it, we present it to one another and explain what we did and why, and let people poke holes in it and encourage that. That's how we get better at it. So that would just be another piece of advice that I think it's true in most professions, but particularly in this one, that we generally solution better together.
Yes. And I think that is phenomenal, right? Be cognizant of your customers' data and their personal, not necessarily their personal data, but the actual business data, right? Making sure you're being considerate of that. But you can definitely talk amongst other friends and admins and developers and things and say, hey, what do you think about this? I'm trying to do this flow. What would be the downsides of this? Is there performance issues? Oh, I had a thought and it just went away. Okay. We're going to move on to questions. We already kind of hit it. Why do you believe that asking the right question is critical to building effective Salesforce solutions? Because the right question is hard to get to sometimes.
The only topic I like better than demo orgs is questions. So I'm happy to talk about this. Here's what I think. Nothing matters that we build if we're not solving the right problem, or if we're not solving it with a solution that is the same relative value, right? We don't want to solve a 25-cent problem with a $100 solution, and vice versa. We don't want to do the opposite either. So while it can be easy and fun to jump in and solve things, at the end of the day, the whole reason that the job exists, that the platform exists, is that we are here to solve business challenges, make life easier in whatever it is that we're trying to do. So I think there's something that I talk about, David, called askability, right? And that we all need to up our askability. And that is something that I think about in a variety of different ways. It is the willingness and knowledge and aware set, mindset, confidence, whatever we want to call it, that we need to ask, right, under all circumstances. And I bring this up specifically with this group because what I have heard from other people that were transitioning from the military is, like, literally somebody said to me, Jodi, I had no idea that I could ask questions when somebody asked me to do something, let alone that I should, right? So there's a little bit of a mindset shift that we need to get people into that says, you know, you're not being insubordinate by asking. The job is to ask. That's the job. I want every job description going forward, if I have anything to do with it, is going to say, must ask great questions, right? Quality questions. So that's part of it. Then there is kind of the context of knowing how to ask, right? So that we understand the tone and the tenor. And when we ask open-ended questions or closed-ended questions. So there's a piece of that. There is the third piece, which is understanding that we don't just ask once. It's not just something we do like at formal discovery, but that questions play this really critical role throughout the process to make sure that we're aligned, right? And then last but not least, I think maybe what you were getting at as well is we have to have enough subject matter expertise to know what questions to ask and why they matter. And all four of those things combine make up what I call somebody's askability. And I think we can work on any four of those. And by the way, they're also fluid, right? I know everything I need to ask if you drop me in a Sales Cloud discovery session that I'm very familiar with. But if I had to go, you know, do deep dive discovery on a manufacturing cloud or a health cloud, like suddenly, like my fourth quadrant is a little bit lacking. So, you know, those things can change, as well as kind of this, the first part, the mindset, knowing when to ask. Like, most of us are really comfortable in discovery, right? We come in with our paper and our pad and like everybody's waiting for our questions. But then we have these times. And so I'm going to see if anybody wants to raise their hand that they've been there. Like the really important person with the SVP title comes to your desk and asks for something, right? Suddenly, like, we forget that we're supposed to ask because they're important, right? Wink, wink. No, it's more important that we get them the right thing, but we can feel that way. Or when somebody says it's urgent or production's broken, right? Sometimes those are another time where we might just start putting hands on keyboards, not still thinking about, hold on, all the more reason we need to make sure we're solving the right thing the right way if there is something broken, as opposed to kind of being reactionary. So those are just a couple examples. And one more I'm going to say, because I think this one resonates with a lot of people as well. We have the person that comes to our desk with the very particular ask, right? I need a validation to do this when I do this, and I want it to say this, and I want it to be shown at the field level as opposed to like whatever the things are. And so we get, I call it situationally intimidated, where we assume this person must know exactly what they need and why, because they're so specific. So those are all just examples where I think we all know better. Like every one of us in this role knows the importance of asking, but there's these times where things slip through for this variety of reasons. And so being aware of that helps us have that ding, 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 like, oh, I think this is one of those. Let me catch myself and actually engage like I should.
And then I'll add on there, and I've seen it once or twice where SIs, well, that's what the customer said they wanted. Let's build it. And off we go to the races, right? And the tech debt grows. And it's like, you know, you look at it later and you're like, why did we build it like that? And it's like, well, that's what they said they wanted. And it's like, well, why didn't we challenge them?
I just participated in a research paper with the folks at elements.cloud. And their findings, they have access to all sorts of metadata across all sorts of orgs, where that 50% of what gets built goes unused.
Mhm.
And I didn't believe it, because that struck me as very, very high. But I poked holes in everything I could think of. Are you talking about, app exchange apps that, bring things in that you don't know? We got rid of, like, they basically solved for all the things that I could think of. Like, hey, sometimes we create an object just because we need to use it one time. Like, no, like, however they did it, I was really comfortable with their methodology. But it's a really interesting, you can go find the white paper on their site. It's a really interesting read when you think about it. And, ultimately we collectively kind of weighed in. That was what I was doing with them on that. And the reason that we point to is, either there's a few other reasons. Sometimes you have disengaged stakeholders, obviously sometimes business changes, but really, I think the heart of it is we're not asking those questions, and we're developing things that they're not scratching the itch, as they say. It's a technical term, by the way.
A very technical one that I think everyone on here can relate to. Okay, so Iris has a question, then we'll get a quick photo, and then Carrie, I see you had one in there that was a good one about stakeholders. So Iris.
Thank you so much, and what a treat. Jodi Hrbek.
Hi, Iris.
One of my favorite people. So my question is, and I really should have asked it earlier because it's referencing what we were talking about previously, the previous topic about new people in the ecosystem and delving into new things to find your niche where possibly more seasoned professionals wouldn't have. And just looking at data, cloud, and AI, I see a lot of new trainings on there, but I jumped on a call. I think Salesforce, Ben did one with Ian Gotts and a few other people. And basically what I got out of from that was, it's so expensive, there's some of this new technology, that they wouldn't look at a new person to possibly hire on, even if it was to get the teas or coffees. You know what I mean? And just like sweep in the background, virtually, of course. So what advice would you give when everything's so shiny and new and you just want to go out there and play and like download it all, and then you're like, because I feel like some of us aren't spring chickens and possibly don't have hours to spend on something that's not going to get them where they want to be?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you my answer, and then I'd be curious to hear, what if David has a different perspective. I think honestly, none of us really know, right? Especially on the AI front, where that's heading. I do agree that, data cloud is a little bit of the shiny object syndrome right now. I don't know that I would therefore hitch my wagon on it. Now, that said, I think it can't hurt, and everybody should be encouraged to be at the forefront, at least, of awareness of what, are the hot topics, and certainly on the AI front, although I think we're just at the beginning of how that's going to go. My guidance would be that if it were me breaking in, I would be all in on the basics, right? The Sales Cloud and the Service Cloud are still the big gorillas. The basics of the platform itself, right? So actually the object model and understanding that automation and declarative automation and flows and security, all of those things that are kind of the bread and butter of an admin, those things translate across all of the different platforms, all of the different industries. I think you need to know those no matter what else you're going to be doing later. So I would never encourage somebody to go look at something new in lieu of doing those things. I also encourage everybody, where it makes sense, if you have some kind of expertise that lends itself to a niche, I think absolutely, the riches are in the niches, as they always say. Mm-hmm. So if somebody already has domain expertise in sales or domain expertise in healthcare or something that, maybe it's just an interest that makes you want to go all in, I think that makes sense. Also, however, that's maybe a bad phrase. Also, however, I also would say you don't have to know that going in, right? Like if you do, great. But I would also just say, go for the most basics platform that's never going to go out of style, by the way, and then you can figure out what lights you up. But to the extent that, you know, if somebody has a little bit of marketing expertise, but maybe new to the ecosystem, I'd probably be going all in on Marketing Cloud, by the way. I think that that seems to be something that, you know, continues to have opportunity in my mind.
Yeah, I think I would add on, because I have some pretty strong opinions on this, is watch what the shiny new object is and see how it flows out for a year. Are people still latching onto it? Is there a demand for it? And so Dave and I have a different perspective. Geraldine also has an even more different perspective on it, because where she is in the product line with Salesforce. Dave and I are really on the pre-sale side, so we see what's being positioned by the company. Data Cloud is very hot right now. AI, very hot. See how that plays out in a year and see how much demand. I've seen a lot of people jump on the Data Cloud bandwagon right away. You can see it all over LinkedIn. One of the things that I will tell people is Omni Studio and CRM Analytics. There tends to be a lot of that being positioned in the sales and solutions, but not a lot of people out there that can actually implement it. Slack, probably another good one. And so finding those niches, right? If someone has a project and they need to implement Omni and you're the only person with Omni, you're probably not getting, you're not going to probably be looking for a job next week, right? You're probably pretty stable in your position and maybe even getting seized up by someone else. So that would be my my thoughts on it. Some of those skills, like Omni in particular, is very difficult because there's really not much on Trailhead for it. So you have to really, what's that, the figure it out ability. You have to really plod your way through it. And then once you've got that experience, you're suddenly in high demand. And it's used in several clouds, right? So that's another thing. Marketing Cloud, really only one cloud. You see Omni Studio, you see it in multi-clouds, industry, health, finance. So just finding those things where it's across those clouds that you could use. So that's my thoughts. Let's go ahead and get a quick picture. We're at the midpoint of our session, and I always end up letting it go a little too far. So let's get a group photo for sharing on social media. This is important because we always need to be branding. We'll plan on posting it on LinkedIn and Twitter tomorrow, and we'll tag everyone in the photo. If you only have your first name showing in the Google Meet and want to be tagged, please feel free to include your full name in the chat window. We'll make sure it's easier to tag it, and we'll get it tagged up correctly. For everyone who wants to grab and participate in the photo, please unmute your video and we'll grab a screenshot. I'll probably have my mouth open at some point. Notorious, as you all know, for taking horrible pictures on here. Dave Nava got a really, really good one of me last time. All right, 3, 2, 1. Please don't let me have my mouth open. Not too bad today. Wow.
I think we should do a picture next time with everyone with their mouth open and just.
And I'll just close mine for once.
Mine usually is. Hey, I wanted to answer, I think Amanda had a question that popped through about is Tableau and CRM Analytics the same? So Salesforce team members are probably better equipped to provide the nuances there.
Yeah. I'll give you the 2-minute and then we'll get back to Carrie's question. Tableau and CRMA look similar. One is on platform, one is off platform. There is overlap between the two of them, and the devil's in the details of when to use each one. Tableau, the way you generally look at it is where is the data at most. If most of your data is off platform, you probably will go Tableau. If most of your data is in the Salesforce platform, you'll probably do CRMA. One of the biggest differences is CRMA being on platform will honor your metadata, meaning any field level security you set on that data is honored as it goes into the CRMA dashboards. So therefore, if Dave is not supposed to see the PII that I entered into those fields, if we do it in CRMA, he would not see it. Once it goes into Tableau off platform, it gets stripped of that metadata. And so therefore it would be exposed. However, it is a more capable tool. So, and if you ever want to go into that more, I could burn holes in your ears talking about it. Hopefully that answers that. Amanda, is that good? Awesome. Okay. Carrie. Carrie wants to go back. Well, Carrie doesn't want to go back. We were on it and I just took us too long. But Jodi, Carrie asks, how do you choose which problem to solve first and set realistic expectations across stakeholders? That's a cagey question right there. I like that one, Carrie.
It is a cagey question. And like all things, the answer is it depends, right? There's not a single right
Oh,
answer,
yeah. I love it.
right? I'm gonna give a cagey answer to that. So I think it's a couple things. I think it's part of the reason that we're always trying to find the cost of the problem, right? How big is a problem or how small? What's the cost if we don't solve it? What's the impact? So it's not just the why. I always want to follow up with the, yeah, but how much or to what extent, right? Those are really important to know. I also am not necessarily a believer that we solve the biggest problem first. Sometimes there are opportunities to get little wins and we can, get a stakeholder something while we go solve, either another person's problem or their bigger problem. Like I look at level of effort and level of complexity as much as kind of level of priority. And I think it's really important that as Salesforce professionals, part of what our role is to bring that context to the table so everybody can understand that, it's not apples to apples. We're, and this is the same, I think, with any time that we're thinking about solutioning. I always use the example of, if I'm sitting down with a stakeholder and I were to look at kind of the list and we were to talk about, what's the value of what are we trying to solve? And we might take something like Path, right? Salesforce Path. And they might say like of all the things, like, that's not the most important thing to me, right? But when we say, yeah, but literally I can have that up and running in 15 minutes and it provides some value and the perception that we're making progress and it very well may be that we do that while we're now going to take the next 6 weeks or 8 weeks or however many sprints to go do some of the integrations or the other things that are a lot more valuable, but are going to, be a while until everybody can feel them. So, that's with one stakeholder or multiple stakeholders. I think that's part of our responsibility, whether we're an internal consultant or an external consultant, is, we need to bring one of my other favorite things, our point of view to the table to help explain what we think is the right order, the right sequence, and why. Right? Because they don't know those things. They don't know what's easy or what's hard or what group might be ready or what group might not be ready, whatever it is. So I think, it's very incumbent on us to always be recognizing that it's not just thinking about, what's the right way to solve something, but what are the right things that are going to move the needle, scratch the itches, etc. And before I forget, POV, right? Point of view. I like to say your perspective offers value. And that is one of the ways that we create value, is not just executing the things that we can do hands on keyboards, but making sure that we're executing the right things in the right order and are able to articulate why we think that is.
Yeah. Oh, man, does that resonate? I think because from being a pre-sales nerd, as I call myself, right? I know all of these products and what we can do with them and how we can build this demo. You just assume everyone else knows that. And then you see that product go out in the wild. And then you come back around in a month or two and you talk to the customer or the client. And it's like, you see someone importing a spreadsheet, or they're exporting it from a report and putting it in a spreadsheet and massaging it and putting it in PowerPoint. And you're like, why are we doing that? Well, this is how we've always done it. This is just a new tool that I can do what I used to do with. And you're like, and so the point, Jodi, I think of you just saying, hey, let's just put the path in, right? It's little things that are visual that give a little bit of sizzle that they can go like, that's pretty cool. Now I can actually see what stage we're in. That gives a bigger win and gives more value to the changes you are making, so that those other changes can come along a little later and a little slower.
And buys you some time, right? Like,
Yes.
and let's be honest, sometimes we just need to buy ourselves some time, and there's some things that we can do that are quick wins that can go a long way. Carrie's raising her hand, which means I think she didn't like my KJ answer.
I loved your answer. It's kind of a follow-up with that. So when you have I'll backtrack a little bit. One analogy I've been using right now, I watch HGTV and Chip and Jo. They were doing a hotel. They were remodeling a hotel. And they had a consultant come in and they said, don't do all the rooms at once. Perfect 2 of them and kind of use that as your model to move forward. And so I use that as my analogy in some of these types of conversations. But one area I am kind of wondering, I guess maybe struggling with right now, is when there are multiple stakeholders and there's different teams. You know, you want to go and make everybody happy, but ultimately I'm like, we really can allocate so much time and like, let's first get this one room right. And then we can kind of build off of their process and see how it works with others. So how do you, I guess, prioritize stakeholders too? So not just the work, but the people that you're serving.
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, I'm going to say it depends, right? But to a certain extent, it's going to depend on the structure that you're working in. And so this might be the kind of thing where if you work in an organization where there isn't any kind of governance committee, that might be a recommendation where you recommend getting one in place, because then it makes you not the decider, right? That way you don't have to be the person that says no. It could be that you, you know, leverage a boss or a manager to, on a regular basis, you know, give you the inputs, right? You might need to know on a regular basis, what are the company priorities? What are the things that are most important to the organization? What are the things that are going to move the needle? Where's the pain? Who's screaming the loudest, like from up above, right? And then you can take that into consideration and also use that to justify, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Make sure you're running it by somebody. So it's a hard question to answer because everybody's organization is different. Ideally, there is some, whether it be a product group, governance group, some group that is maybe not making the actual decisions without you being present to provide the context, right? But is at least prioritizing the problems so that then you can go back and say, hey, based on what I've heard, here's how I think we should address this because it aligns with what you guys are trying to do. And if that doesn't exist, then frankly, the onus becomes on us to go figure that out and know, like, again, where's the biggest bang for the buck, right? And where are some of the things that we can do quickly that are going to enable us to buy some time in those groups. I'm all about buying time. I hope that helps.
That does. It does. Thanks.
Yeah. And it's so funny, right? You go through any of these certs and they'll start talking about kind of BA type scenarios, or even the BA cert itself, where it's like, you will identify a product owner and a PM and a key stakeholder and decision maker. And you get out in the real world and you're like, nah, I don't see any of those people. Then one's walking around with a sign on their shirt that says,
they're
I'm
all
the product
me.
owner.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's like, where do you start and how do you figure that out? And I think that's to Carrie's question. And part two, a lot of times we can be our own devil, and that excellence is the enemy of good enough, right? How do we get the use case solved and move on to the next one or to the next problem, right? What is good enough? Carrie, to your point, how good do you need to make those rooms in that hotel, those 2 model rooms, to get enough where you have an idea what it looks like? And I think that's where another topic where I've been diving into a little bit lately with one of the projects I'm working on is UI UX, right? Making sure it's consistent. Do we have the visual? Do we have the effect we're looking to get out of this? And then we move on to the next.
So I wanted to throw a couple things out because I forgot to comment on that point to Carrie. You're right. That was a great point. That aligns with what I would call minimal viable product, right? Or sometimes people call it minimal lovable product. We want to make sure we're not rolling out half
I'm going to
a
use
car,
that tomorrow.
right? It's not half a
MLP.
car. It's still a car that runs. It just might not be like the car that we would like to have. But I think that's another really important topic. And it's something else that's really important to bring up with stakeholders, because sometimes we have to train them on that, right? The truth of the matter is it's gonna end up different than we think it is, whatever it is, whether it's the hotel room, whether it's the, you know, the new corridor we're building, whatever it is. It's going to end up different. We can't possibly know all the things until we have humans on keyboards actually banging through it, till we understand all the things that we never thought of, all the gotchas, all the added value that we didn't even know it was going to bring, that suddenly the things that we thought were going to move the needle, they didn't really care about, but all these other things that we just thought were whatevs, like suddenly like people are like, this is the greatest thing ever, right? That's the reality of it. And so to the extent we can, we want to try to build just enough incremental value that we can start and then we can iterate. The key thing though is our stakeholders have to trust us that we're going to come back and actually do V.2 and V.3, right? Because a lot of people, especially if they've been in kind of traditional IT on-prem, like, you know, they spent months and months working on something and somebody promised that they're going to, you know, get it on the next release and it never appeared. So we might have some, you know, damage control or some education to say, like, actually, we do this on purpose. We build for that. We plan for that. And you've got to show them where it is in your plan to say that, you know, I am going to go work with this other stakeholder, but you're still going to have X% of our time as we go forward in order to get your feedback and continue to iterate this. So it's less risk and delivers ultimately better solutions when you do it that way. But it can sometimes be challenging to convince people if they haven't yet had that experience at all or with you, that you will in fact be back for more.
Yeah, true agile process, right? Let's get an MVP out there, an ugly baby, no matter how ugly, but as long as the baby is able to function and meet the use case. And then we start to build or recognize enhancements, especially from our end users, that we can put in backlogs so that when we do have time, we come back and start to iterate. Like you said, iteration is so important. I know myself, one of my weaknesses is I always want to build to perfection right off the bat, and that is unrealistic. Very, very unrealistic.
Well, and you end up doing wasted work anyway, right? Because inevitably
you don't know what you don't know yet.
No, and also, by the way, this is a little bit off topic, but I think equally related in terms of how do we make sure we're not doing wasted work is we want to make sure that we're partnering and demoing as we're building with our stakeholders, right? So unlike those home improvement shows where we do the grand reveal, right? We push the thing and woohoo, everybody sees it for the first time. This is not that, because a lot of times people don't even really understand what they're asking for, what you were talking about until they've seen it, let alone had time to put on hands on keyboard. So it's the reason I say demo early and often, and make sure that the demo that they see and the first time they have hands on keyboards isn't during UAT with an expectation that you're going to, you know, quickly go live. It needs to be, you know, we do something called a design sign off, which is this hasn't gone to QA yet. We're not ready for UAT yet, but we want you to see it. We want you, I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to walk you through, not telling you it's perfect. There might be some bugs in the automation, or there might even be things that we haven't automated yet, but you can see the data model. You can understand what it's going to look like. And we're bringing you in on a regular cadence so that by the time we go into QA, we're making sure everything works, but there's nothing that anybody hasn't seen before, doesn't understand exactly what it looks like on the platform. They know what we're talking about. And then we can legit do a QA. They can still do a UAT, but at that point, they're just double checking everything, making sure we covered all the edge cases. It's pencils down as far as design goes. I like to introduce the word code freeze, which is ironic because mostly I'm not doing code, but that's something else that helps everybody understand that I'm going to demo this enough until we get to the point where we're going to agree we're in code freeze. We, again, behind the scenes might still be doing some code or some bug checks, but they understand that we're in code freeze. Pencils down, no new things. You've signed off, but no new surprises either. You know exactly how it's going to work.
Yeah. And truthfully, like, one last point on that is, does any implementation go to production and 3 months later someone doesn't want to say, can we get a new field that does X? And you're like, okay, right? And that's really the power of Agile and the power of the platform in order to change it. Okay, we've got 5 minutes left, Jodi. I want to get you on one of our favorite topics here, networking. How has networking played a role in your career development, and what advice do you have for others looking to leverage their connections to gain experience, especially because you are such a high profile in the ecosystem?
Okay, I have a lot to say about this, and I only have 5 minutes, so I'm talking fast. Number one, I think
Don't make us get the hook.
I think it's misnamed. I think we should call it net connecting. It makes it sound hard and negative when we call it network, right? It's actually an easy thing to do when we realize all it is about how we make connections and connect with people. And I know a lot of people on this call, so I know everybody that I'm looking at all these faces are already great networkers. But I'm going to make a couple points that I think are really important. Number one, if you are fortunate already to have a Salesforce job, you need to remember that networking isn't just something we do in the Ohana. It is equally important that we are making connections and networking inside our organization. That is very powerful in terms of how we get champions, how we get promotions, how we get opportunities as other people leave their organization and pull us into bigger and better positions. So, right, I love the Ohana. There's nothing better, but we need to be equally cognizant that our stakeholders and our boss and our colleagues and our team members, do they think you're an MVP? That's just as important as, right, the ecosystem. So I wanted to say that. I also wanted to just give an example, though, to say how much I have treasured my relationships inside the ecosystem. I hosted the very first user group in Dallas, Fort Worth, before they were a thing, somewhere around 2004. And there were about 6 of us there. And one of those people was the very first admin I hired, who I have continued to work with over the years. He and I exchanged, I needed a professional service reference today. We changed back and forth. I mean, all these years later, that is still one of my regular go-tos. One of the other people that was present that day is an amazing woman named Tani Long that some of you may know. She's a trainer, CRMA trainer, as a matter of fact, CRM Analytics. A lot of people have gotten certified because of Tani, but she was there that day. Tani was one of the very first people that read my book to give me feedback. So that was probably 18 years later. So I'm very bullish, not just on how networks can kind of help you get a job and all of that stuff. But I think we really can make really good friendships, relationships. I think it's important to do it inside the Ohana, inside your organization. But I also have to say this, it's really important, especially as people are getting their first jobs. And what I hear a lot from people is, ever since I got my job, I haven't been on LinkedIn, and I should be posting more, and I should be doing more things. And so I'm letting everybody off the hook to say there's no such thing as what you should do, right? If you've been working that hard to go land that job, it's okay if you need to put all of your time and attention to really knocking it out of the ballpark at work and taking care of your family. And as amazing as the Ohana is, it can sometimes be overwhelming. It's not a right way to do it. The beauty of it is you can figure out what season you're in. You can lean in, you can lean out, you can take what you need, right? So just let yourself off the hook. So
yeah, it's funny you say that, because I've actually been taking a break from it lately, because it's just been, it can be consuming, right? FOMO can be real on there. Everyone's getting the data cloud cert, and you're like, I don't really have time for data cloud cert right now. I got to focus on that. Never mind the fact, like, Dave and I can't work with it in our current vertical. So you just have to kind of step away sometimes and take a little break from it. So excellent advice. We have covered a lot of ground in the session. I could talk to you probably the rest of the night, much to everyone else's chagrin. It would be great to continue this conversation further, but what closing thoughts would you like to impart to the audience? I know you've put out some good thoughts already.
Man, I just gave you all my good stuff. I would have.
Oh no, I bet you have a lot more.
A big ending. I would have saved it for that. I would simply say, I don't think there's any better career in the world. I continue to be bullish on Salesforce careers. Part of the reason that I am so bullish about them is there's no single definition of a Salesforce professional. They come in every way, shape, size, color, form. The roles are so different. I believe that everybody can find the role that's right for them. But I also, it's not easy. This is not for the faint of heart. But hang in there. We've talked about a lot of different things to do. And I, truly believe when you are getting hands-on keyboards, you are leveraging the network, you're building in public, you're offering to show it off as much as you can, you're being true to really what parts get you excited about the role. I think the possibilities are endless, and there's a lot of us out here that are rooting for you.
Yeah. Thank you. And there's some stuff I got to start working on. Thanks, Jodi. Before we close, I'd like to thank Jodi for co-hosting tonight's session. It's been awesome having you here. Really a delight getting your perspective on the topics we have discussed. With that, thank you all so much for attending. I hope to see you next session, and have a great Wednesday night. Jodi, thank you again.
Awesome. Thank you for having me. Great to see so many familiar faces and meet some new ones. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jodi. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jodi.
Be safe.